There has been a lot of discussion, obviously, this morning, probably in coffee shops across the country, online, among friends, here on the radio, about the outcomes last night. I was just chatting with our upcoming guest off air about what happened across Idaho. You had a lot of media people who were saying, "Oh, the Democrats are going to do very well," but I think a lot of that was it's number one, either wishful thinking on their part, or number two, they maybe haven't been in this part of the country long enough to really understand what the voting public is like. And throughout the campaign, the last few months, I got the impression that Jack Johnson, because of his roots in growing up in an agricultural community, that he really had the pulse of this community as well when it came to elections. And there were a lot of people who said, well, his opponent in this election for Twin Falls County Commissioner Jill Scheme had great name recognition. She was diligent about her door to door. And I think a lot of people in media, because of that, thought, well, she's going to do very well. But as it turned out, it wasn't even close. Jack Johnson joins us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And first of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Bill.
And the second part of this is, do you think I may have gotten something right there that the expectations some people had, they weren't really aware of how this community works?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it was proven last night nationwide. Our nation's ready for a change. But even at our scale here in our local races in the counties and legislative, I think people are happy with our conservative values we have here and the way we respond, to everybody and treat people right, and I think that showed also in the polls.
A lot of people out there had an opportunity to meet all of the candidates, but there's also that advantage in the fact that both you and Don Hall, I mean, you've lived around here a very very long time, so it wasn't just you weren't meeting people often the first time. You were just seeing people again that you've known probably all of your lives. And when people are asked to make a judgment during an election, I'm sure that they look at that and they can say, all right, I know the character of these people and I've known it for a long time, and character doesn't change. Once your parents instill you with that, it's a constant. Do you think that itself helped out?
I think it really does, Bill. I had a lady come up to me and said, you know what, Jack, you're the same person you were in 1985 when you started in law enforcement, and you haven't changed. And it's hard for us to recognize that in ourselves sometimes, but I really appreciated that comment. And the other side of that, if I ever do change, I hope somebody comes up and says, you know what, you've kind of turned into a jerk. Go look in the mirror. Because I think it's important.
This new role, it's I won't say it's radically different. It's still public service, but it's not at all like being in law enforcement. I'm sure that sometimes you're still going to get grief from various elements of the public, but it's a different type of process that you're going to be dealing with now. Have you given much thought as to what might be some of your first goals when you take office?
Well, I have, and you're right. It is a different process, and anybody going into this has a certain learning curve. I hope mine will be a little less just because of my exposure to county government throughout the years in law enforcement. But law enforcement's not what it's about. It's about serving our citizens. And, we've got a lot to do. We've got a lot to plan for our community and in our county with the population growth that's going to be coming here. We need to get an up-to-date comp plan in place with a strategic plan to guide it. And we need to reach out to the public. I'm absolutely serious when I talk about town hall meetings. We're going to be starting those after the first of the year. And I want to hear from people personally and get some ideas. And everything we do, is going to need input from our citizens, our ag community, our business community, our elected officials, our department heads. We're all going to have to work together, to keep Twin Falls County on a great place for people that live here and maintain our way of life as best we can.
You took my question because I was going to ask you about the town hall meetings and the outreach, and uh, this is essentially an opportunity to. I mean, obviously, you hear some of it during an election season, what people are thinking, but once you're in office, that input, because a lot of people can't make it down downtown to a meeting when it's taking place. But this is an opportunity to, let's say, go out to Buell or go out to even Murtaugh and talk to your neighbors and find out what they're thinking.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's important, and I've had a little bit of criticism over, saying I'm going to do town hall meetings. But the realistic side of it is if it's worth my time if only 5 people show up. If 100 people show up, that's even better. And hopefully it's on a civil level. And even if it's not, people are unhappy about some things. Let's air some of those opinions, and then let's work towards some solutions when we're done with it.
I would think too that the public and because it is a small county, they know you, they know Don, they know Terry, that you're all considered a fairly level-headed group of people. That working together as well and working with the public, that we can accomplish a great deal.
Yes, and I believe that, and I truly believe working with people. This isn't Jack Johnson's county to make things up and do what I think. We're elected by our citizens in this county, and we want to continue to represent those values and what people want. And it's a pretty diverse set of circumstances on all sides of the board. When you talk about whether it's economic development or preserving farm ground or our aquifer or whatever the case might be, it's pretty diverse, and there'll be some hurdles, I'm sure.
Our guest is Jack Johnson, and he has been elected to the Twin Falls County Commission following yesterday's election, and he's spending a few minutes with us this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. It's 9:14 and it's 40. Two things you mentioned there. You mentioned that this is such a big farming community still, and you mentioned economic development. Now, farming itself can be economic development, but just in the last few weeks, I've had people on the air talking about some expansion plans at the fairgrounds. Also, people talking about expansion plans at the airport, or where should the airport be located? Should it change its location? And all of these issues have to be long term because you just can't pick up any facility that's that large and say, all right, I'm going to move it down the road 10 miles. But these are going to be huge issues, and sometimes I'm sure there's going to be some conflict.
I agree, and some of that conflict might be, within our own county. Some of it could be with other counties, and we need to try and work together with our neighbors in other counties for what's going to best serve our communities. There's always been every time talk comes up about a new regional airport, there's some controversy about where that's going to be. And that's something we're going to have to work through and these, with our community's help, decide what's going to be the best service there for everybody.
You mentioned that mutual cooperation. I guess that may be redundant, but working with some neighboring counties, and you having worked in Jerome County for a number of years, obviously, Roger, Charlie, and Kathy, you know them personally. Do you think that that's going to help? I mean, maybe not just the literal bridge between the two counties, but create some other bridge where we can work a little more closely?
I think it will. I sure hope it does. We're not in a us against them situation. I don't think it should ever be viewed that way. I think we all should work together for what's going to be the most beneficial for our communities, and sometimes that's helping a neighboring county out, and sometimes that's them helping us out. So
The other end of this is new office, working directly with people in Twin Falls County, but sometimes you have to deal with governments either in Boise or even in Washington that say, all right, this is the way you're going to do things or else. Uh, Obviously, you're going to come up against some of that. How do you deal with it?
well. I've got to. I'm going to have to learn to temper myself a little bit. I tell you that, Bill. When it comes to working with federal authorities, I have a pretty strong spine, and sometimes it gets straight. And from a law enforcement standpoint, your sheriff is the ultimate authority in your county, and it's easier to deal with federal federal authorities from that level, because you have a lot more firmer footing to stand on. I think, on the commissioner side of things, I'm not going to stand around and let us be pushed around by our federal partners, but I also think we need to, try to work together as best we can too, and until it comes to a point where we just can't deal with it or whatever. So.
I got a couple of minutes left in this segment. We talked last week about your opponent, and the one thing I picked up from that conversation was you really personally like Jill Scheme, and it's not easy to go into one of these things and run against someone who you have a personal relationship with as a friend. Um, the two of you, I thought, kept it a clean campaign, and the independent candidate who was running as well. That the three of you really seem to manage this without a lot of bitterness. Do you have a message for those opponents?
I absolutely do. First of all, and I posted some on my Facebook this morning, I want to thank both Jill Scheme and Tony Bourne. We all ran parallel, clean campaigns. I think that's so important for our community that we do that. There's enough mud throwing at in other races and other levels that we don't need to subject our citizens to. I very much appreciate them. Jill and I have been, friends for probably 10 years anyhow, and I still consider her a friend. Tony Bourne, I met him through this season and this election season. He's just a genuinely nice person. And I appreciate both of them. I appreciate them, putting their hat out there in the ring, and I appreciate our citizens using the democratic process to, elect who they felt was the best going to represent our values in it.
I'll say this for everybody that was involved: the sun still came up this morning.
Yes.
Well,
and it's a beautiful sunrise too, and a beautiful day. It's just really nice for November out here. I don't know, hopefully we're going to catch up so that it doesn't impact our water forecast for next year. But boy, it's hard not to enjoy this right now.
we want to thank you for your efforts, and we want to say congratulations one more time, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Bill. You have a good day, and thank you, Twin Falls County.
I want to thank Jack Johnson for joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. He's on his way to his new position as a county commissioner here in Twin Falls County. Don Hall also winning election last night, Don running unopposed. Just a quick note, Jack mentioned the beautiful weather, and Dr. Tripp mentioned it too, but it's not going to last. You've not yet tested that heating unit at home. You better fire it up and make sure it's working, or at least it's working effectively. And if it's not, you've got to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. I just want to remind you, they'll get the job done right and do it right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley, 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. 920, and it's 39.